welcome to Currency Cast Travel Edition. I'm Mar Pedrosa. I'm the Global Industry Leader for the travel industry at Cantox. And today I'm pleased to be joined by two leaders of the industry. We have Mario Gavira from Kiwi.com, the Vice President of Growth. And then we also have Mauricio Prieto, which is the founder of eDreams and founder of the Travel Tech Essentialist newsletter. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could you guys, for the ones that maybe they don't know you, explain a little bit where are you coming from, what is your background, and we can start from here.
Right, so I come from the travel industry. I've been really working there from day one when we were still printing tickets physically and sending them to the customers. So it's been a long way, but I basically moved to the digital world in 2001. I went to London, was part of the founding team of Apollo, which was one of the big first OTAs in Europe. We were basically in the dot-com boom, the first wave, so we had a lot of funding and we started to build these pretty strong brand in Europe. I mean, Northern Europe, Northwestern Europe, mostly UK and Germany. And after a few years' time, then we basically merged with eDreams and Go Voyage, and that became the group ODIGEO, where I had the pleasure to work with Mauricio for several years. I was mainly focused on the French market, then moved to meta search business, and then I decided to change airs back in 2018, I think, and now I've been in Kiwi.com for 2.5 years, as you mentioned, VP of Growth, so mainly focused on traffic acquisition, retention, customer retention, and also some cross-functional projects around conversion optimization and monetization of our customers.
And I do not come from the travel, originally from the travel sector. I come from, I'm originally from Mexico. I went to business school in California, and I was working product development for Charles Schwab, which was the first online brokerage company. It was a traditional broker, and then it changed its entire business model to online brokerage. So I started working there in 95. From 95 to 99, it was a very fortunate timing, because right when they were starting to change their entire model to an online brokerage model. And so I was working in product development for 4 years. So I had experience in that area. I got together with Javier Perez Tenesa, who I had known we were friends from Mexico. And at that point he told me, think about starting something in the travel sector, and at that time there were a couple of companies in the States that seemed to have some initial traction with an OTA model, and so we decided to start an OTA in Europe. The original model was very different from what it ended up being, right? Because we started with tour operator packages and with a we call them dream guides. It was like a social media of experts, and then we changed things around and we decided to be experts in flights. And we started in 2000. We came to Barcelona in 99, and we launched eDreams Spain, Italy, and UK and France in 2000. And then we kind of closed a couple of markets and consolidated in Spain and Italy. And then by the time I left eDreams in 2014, 2015, we were in eDreams. eDreams ODIGEO was in 48 countries now. And that's, I met Mario in 2011, right?
Yeah. Quite.
And the second leverage buyout in eDreams, we were it was a company called Permira, and the idea was to do kind of a consolidation play in Europe, and that's when eDreams, Apollo, and Go Voyage kind of merged and created eDreams ODIGEO. So that was like kind of very mass market, high volume, thinking big, and then I went to completely thinking as small as possible, as niche, and very kind of like what I'm doing at Travel Tech Essentialist is kind of very thinking as a one person company trying to do that, right? So I'm launching different platforms. First of all, I'm understanding different needs, and I'm launching platforms to hopefully be able to scale. But again, in a very different approach than eDreams. So that's what I'm doing. So in different capacities, but always in the travel ecosystem, online travel ecosystem.
Okay. And are you also now investing as an angel? Because I know you mentioned Javier, and he's on the 4 founders, no? If I'm not mistaken, he's part of the 4 founders team. I'm not sure if you are also on the.
I'm currently not investing, but one of the platforms that I have actually is a platform that kind of connects startups that are looking for that are fundraising and investors that are either specialized in the travel market or VCs that like the travel sector. They don't invest exclusively in the travel sector, or they invest. Some of their portfolio companies are in travel. So that's one of the platforms that I have through Travel Tech Essentialist.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you, guys. I wanted to ask you first about the current environment in the industry, because at least what I see for the conversations that I have with CFOs, CEOs, and many people of the industry is that there is quite a lot of optimism, I would say, conservative optimism, if I can call it like this, because bookings are booming, prices of the flights are high and everyone is booking. Hotels also, they are all full. I don't know, I would like to see, maybe Mario, we start with you. How do you see it in terms of what is the situation now at Kiwi? Do you see this increase in bookings also in your platform, in your day-to-day?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously last year was the year of the famous revenge travel, right? Where we had massive growth, which was triggered basically by the catch-up demand, or the pent-up demand, as they called it. This year, we were surprised to see that the year started really very, very strong. We also had triple-digit growth, really, compared to 2019, which was obviously quite surprising for us. Now, part of it is also due to the fact that we have been growing quite significantly and in terms of marketing and so on. So it was driven, obviously, also by some of our own capabilities, but also because the demand was there. The growth has been slowing down, at least from what we see, and this is purely driven, I mean, specifically on flights over the last, let's say, 4 weeks. That doesn't mean that we are now, let's say, not growing, but it's not anymore high double-digit numbers, but rather low double-digit numbers. So still good compared to 2019, and obviously compared to 2022, but there is a slowdown, and our main hypothesis here is that obviously the booking values have massively gone up. The airlines have been obviously maximizing their yields because they're still reduced capacity and they know they can sell more expensive. That is especially visible on the long haul sales. So the long haul right now for summer, it's nearly impossible to actually do any type of sales activity because their planes are full. On the short haul, medium haul side, especially intra-Europe with all of the capacity of the low-cost carriers, there's still availability. So what we see is the airplanes, I mean the airlines, the big ones at least are around 80-85% load factor. So they still have this last 15%, but they're holding up. So they are keeping the prices up because they expect that there will be the last minute wave that will allow them to sell expensively. But it might also go wrong and they might need to for some last minute offers to fill the planes. And again, talking mostly of the Ryanairs, Vueling, Wizz Air, the big low-cost carriers, right, in Europe. So there we today still see growth. We do expect to keep the growth for this summer season, and then the big question mark is obviously what will happen afterwards.
Correct.
Because there,
if it's sustainable or not.
Exactly, we don't know, and nobody nobody has a crystal ball. We obviously know that with inflation, the macroeconomic headwinds, with the fact that again, the people might have kept these spendings for the last summer trip, but then how much will be left in terms of let's say purchase power for further travel in the post-summer season? That is something we don't know, and we are obviously having different scenarios where we kind of project rather conservative up to slightly negative possible outcomes depending on how this works. So basically we'll see after the summer. That's our current status.
Right. Mauricio, any view on your side?
I think that if you see it, I think Mario, he's in Kiwi. He's a very successful and high growth company. And I think that there's a handful of companies that are growing well. If we think about on the kind of early startups, right? Like in the startup environment, there's a bloodbath, right? There's like the level of funding that has happened this year is at record lows.
Especially also on later stages, no?
Because there's a trickle down effect between actually the early stage startups are doing better than the late stage, because the late it trickles down from the publicly traded companies that the multiples have been cut significantly, and that has an impact on the late stage startups. And the early stage startups, also the fact that they're starting now also gives them an advantage in terms of focus, in terms of in terms of approach to the equation between growth and profitability, right? There's some startups those startups that raised in 2020, 2021, they have a tough time growing to the valuation that they raised, and at which point you need to start having down rounds, and that's kind of very painful for everybody involved. Companies that before were favoring growth over profitability, now they're doing the opposite, right? So they're trying to have profitable models, and the growth capacity is kind of impacted.
Mm-hmm. Now it seems that
just on that front, even in Kiwi we obviously have these type of discussions too, right? Because we have been a profitable company, but sometimes you can obviously invest more in growth, diluting your bottom line. And that even now with our investors who are also from Silicon Valley, GA, General Atlantic is one of the big investors, right? And these guys are coming up with very clear guidance from what their expertise, also from what they see in their portfolio of companies, making us focus on the rule of 40, as they say, which is a combination of top and bottom line growth. So it's not only about the top line, and we also now are obviously making, let's say, adjusting some of our marketing strategies to make sure that we also grow the bottom line, right? That's clearly something that everybody is seeing. And
probably that clear guidance is as clear as the guidance a year or 2 years ago that was completely the opposite. It's like you have to grow. Yeah. And now it's it's somewhat reversed.
Well, I think it's always clear. I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy, right? You cannot grow at all costs, and also maybe now we have been very strict on the profitability, but at the end we need to look at the bottom line. Otherwise, we were seeing valuations that now when you look at them, now it's very easy to have an opinion into that. You could see 100x, even 200x turnover, which was quite crazy. And I think this, well, in this case it was COVID, no, but this makes people feel more near to the reality of the business. At the end, we are here to make money, we are here to make the business grow, but not at all cost. Right? So it's complex. And if you have to give me some names of players, companies that you think they have benefited out of the situation that we have suffered, because one of the names that comes into my mind is Airbnb, for example, right? I think Airbnb, now you let me know, but I think they have win quite a lot market share in that sense. For what, I mean, I have been following, of course, your newsletter, I have seen some numbers. But in your opinion, do you think that there are some players that now are in a better position due to what we have been suffering this
Well, the two players that come to mind, because also they've been very good at getting the word out of what they have done and how much their business has changed is one is Airbnb. Also Airbnb is a relatively newer player, right? But their focus, I mean, apparently Airbnb was close to being dead, not, or close. They were in the emergency room, and then they got a round of funding 6 months before their IPO, and at that moment nobody was talking about IPO. And they what Airbnb says is that they went from seeing themselves as a travel company to seeing a huge opportunity to be like a work company and a living company. So you don't know how much PR and spin there is to that. But if you start looking at the average stays, if you start looking at kind of the concept, how people are engaging with Airbnb, it seems like people are indeed staying longer periods of time. People are staying also closer to home in different cases. I mean, they're using Airbnb differently. And what is also undoubtable is that the work, the way we define work, at least in the now hybrid work and remote work, in some way Airbnb has a product that fits relatively well to that. So Airbnb is one of them, and another one is Hopper, right? So Hopper seems also to be a company that has done really well, just incorporating. I mean, I was going to say fintech products, but it's just incorporating products that address human basic needs. We call them fintech because they have to categorize them, but it's like reducing the friction with the way people behave and the way people think. By reducing that friction and by reducing how nervous people are when making a big purchase, they have come up with interesting products, which then they now, I mean, I was reading the other day that more than 15% of the revenues now come from their clouds. No, from this product being sold to other travel players. So, I mean, those two companies come to mind.
It's very, now that you mentioned Hopper, I was about to mention it too, because they are now, is what you said, more a fintech player than a travel player. And the line is very thin between fintech and travel. What we see is not just Hopper, no? I mean, now maybe we can talk about Kiwi also, but for example, I know Booking.com, they also hire like 300 or 400 people just to build a fintech unit. We have some clients in the B2B space that they are also building their fintech units. At the end, this is a very, very competitive environment, very competitive industry. It's really difficult to differentiate yourself. But if you put the client at the center, really the client at the center, okay, not just marketing it, but putting it and building products that can remove the frictions and the problems that they may have, at some point, this will lead to more sales and more growth. And from my point of view, this fintechization of travel, it will be a must at some point. If you don't put your payments strategy, your fintech strategy, meaning, we see it in Cantox on the hedging part of it. We help them hedge the currency risk and making the most out of currencies by spotting arbitrage opportunities on the contracting side, helping them sell more. If you don't take into account all these concepts in your day-to-day, you're going to be the last in the line at some point. And this is something that is moving very, very quick. And I think now there is this moment of FOMO in the industry of we need to do something about fintech. We need to be a fintech, or at least embed fintech into the business. I don't know, Mario, if you have any initiative in Q.com that you can share about fintech or payments.
I will first play the devil's advocate
okay.
here. Overall, I would argue that Hopper has built a great narrative, and there's no doubt that they have basically managed to monopolize the headlines in the travel industry for the last 2-3 years. They probably have grown massively top line, but it's still out what is their profitability. Speaking, coming back to the bottom line, right? And I have not yet seen any number or Hopper around what is their actual results down in the P&L. So that I would say is one question mark I have around Hopper. Now then on fintech in general, obviously there are many parts, right?
Exactly.
And there's the pure payment optimization part and adding new payment methods, which is a huge obviously opportunity now that also there are more and more new type of native payments that are popping up all over the world, right? Take an example like Brazil, where Pix is now the in-app payment method is by far the most widespread payment method across the entire country. Colombia has another type of local payment method. In Europe, there's open banking. So for sure, we have a huge number of new type of payment methods where we as an OTA, to make the shopping experience as frictionless as possible, we are adding them to allow basically our customers to pay with whatever method they want to pay. Then there is these more type of what they call fintech features, like which sometimes are a mixture of guarantees, insurances, installment payments, and there, to be honest, that's where Hopper has doubled down. And we in Kiwi are also investing into some of these features. We have already rolled out what we call our Fair Lock, which is pretty much the same thing that Hopper does. For a fee, you
the price freeze.
Exactly. You keep your airline ticket at this given price for a number of days, and then basically you can redeem it or not. That is something which has a certain traction, but I wouldn't say that it's a game changer, to be very honest. But then again, we have to test and iterate on the features, right? So I think that these typically installment also is something that we know there is a certain audience for that, a certain customer segment that is very interested in that. It's nothing new on earth. It has been there for many years in different shape and forms. But it's true that there is a need to enrich with these features the travel shopping experience. And then there's a third, I think, layer in fintech, which is the actual financial institutions, which can be banks, credit card companies, and so on, who realize that, especially in the last years, travel has been such a massive spending pocket for them, and that's obviously they will generate money whenever there are transactions. They are doubling down in travel, so there's an opposite stream, right? So the big banks like Capital One with Hopper, like Booking.com, who did a partnership with Barclays a few weeks ago, and some other even acquisitions from big financial institutions. So I think JP Morgan also announced something recently, right? There seems to be also an appetite from the finance institutions to get into more basically a foothold into travel, because they realize that that's where the money is, right? And they obviously follow the money, and therefore they want to own all these customers. So a lot of moving pieces, very interesting. Some of it is more, I would say, PR, and as Mauricio said, so sometimes it's difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is actually, let's say, positive, impacting our bottom line. But we are obviously exploring them and testing all of the features which we think can drive value for the customer.
And sometimes the narrative is important too, right? Because when you're selling a product, you need to know how to sell it. And if you're selling, and then add this insurance product, like a lot of people sell insurance in a very kind of mechanical way. If you're changing the narrative to positioning insurance in a much more, trying to give you peace of mind, and selling it in a way that is a lot more human and less mechanical or transactional. Maybe you're selling a very similar product, but you might be more successful at selling it because you're able to kind of sell a dream or sell a concept, or sell something that speaks to your kind of cognitive way of thinking, right? So I think that and that's also something that Airbnb has done well. Airbnb, the whole narrative behind Airbnb and the way that they have built a brand, a really strong brand, right? I mean, at least all the studies seem to point out that Airbnb, they also invest in performance, but it seems like, their brand is very strong. They created a whole category, so it's kind of unfair to talk about Airbnb as an example to follow, because very few brands create categories. So that's kind of a bad example.
But you need to sustain in time at the end. We have a lot of companies that they have been the creators of the categories, but at the end they are getting disrupted at some point. What I think they are doing really well is they are constantly innovating. I see the CEO Brian Chesky every X month asking to the Twitter. Maybe this is also part of the narrative and part of the marketing, but he's there asking to the people, what should we improve in Airbnb? And
he does have it might be narrative, but he has the ear on the ground.
Yes.
Just like Musk. Musk clearly is, the previous Twitter CEO never tweeted. It's difficult to be a CEO if you're not using your product, if you're not listening to your customers, right? So I think that's something that Chesky at least seems to. He has a very good sense of what the market is saying, and he engages, and it might be narrative, but I think that if he's pointing that way, the rest of Airbnb are also following suit. If the founder and CEO is doing this, everybody else also listen to the market, right?
It's part of the company culture at the end, is putting the client really at the center, not just in a marketing way, but also in the day-to-day. Buy now, pay later is a concept that we have seen, especially 2 years, 1 year ago, 3 years ago, in all the conferences that I was going. This was like the main topic, and honestly, in line with what you just said, Mario, I think this is what I see is that it's more narrative than real tangible concept, at least from what I see. I don't know anyone that is using buy now pay later products in the travel industry.
I do know one.
What? Okay.
Listen, I can tell you in France, there's a local challenger to Amazon, which is called Cdiscount. It's a big retailer. Anything, and they have a massive. The flight product of Cdiscount is powered at least partly by an OTA that I worked with, and over 50% of what they sell in terms of flights and packages is buy now pay later. Now they have built their whole marketing and their whole kind of narrative and value proposition around that, and obviously it's targeting a very specific segment of the French customers, right? But it works. It does work, and it is impressive. Now, Other than that, I can tell you that I don't know anybody else, but we haven't tested it yet in Kiwi, and we're gonna be testing it. So we definitely wanna test it because I mean we do feel that, especially for tickets with higher book, price value, which can be long haul types now, where the prices are going up like crazy. There might be an appetite. What we won't do is do it ourselves. We will use an expert who basically provide us with, especially let's say, managing the risk, because that's obviously where it gets dangerous potentially, and we don't feel that that's part of our core expertise, and therefore there are enough expert players out there who know how to do this, and we're gonna be seeing if there's any traction.
Okay. No.
The most successful buy now pay later is a credit card, right?
Correct.
In a sense, exactly.
Correct.
That's
That's why I think there's nothing new into that, right? It's like we have been doing it, but now that the word buy now pay later, it seems that the concept, it seems that everyone should have. At the end, I agree with Mario that if I was the owner of a company like this, I would give the option to my client. This for sure. This is not going to decrease bookings. It's giving the option, and then for this segment of population that maybe they are going to use it, of course, go for it. Then we see cases like buy now pay later companies per se, like Klarna, for example. You know them really well. That they have seen the valuation going very, very, from, I think it was like something around 50 or 60 billion to 80% less or 70% less. I don't know now where they are. But I agree with you that giving the option to the client is something that is, of course, what is not going to happen is going to harm the business. That's for sure. That's for sure. Okay, I need to ask the question. AI. Okay. AI, what do you think about it? Do you think that it has really tangible outcomes? It has. Do you see some companies that they are using already AI? Maybe companies that are built just to give AI feasibilities to other travel companies. How do you see the concept of AI in the travel industry?
So, first of all, AI is a lot of things.
Yes.
And if we speak about machine learning, for instance, Kiwi, we have been using machine learning for over 5 years now. And a lot of our capabilities around what we call the virtual interlining, of combining different flight segments into new itineraries, even in optimizing the content we send to our meta search partners, all of these stuff is already heavily basically driven by algorithms, which are basically.
You're the hackers of the industry.
we do feel that we are disrupting the airline industry. Yes, we are proud of that. Now, this said, if you speak about generative AI, there obviously this is opening some new opportunities, new windows. We in Kiwi, we are exploring it very proactively in many different domains. And to give you a few examples, our let's say what we were calling our FIQs. There was a chatbot that was allowing customers to ask questions. This is now purely fully driven by AI, right? That it was fairly easy and quick to implement. We are using AI, generative AI, for a lot of our internal workflows. Stuff like creating copy ads, even in SEM. We have done experiments, because obviously a company like Kiwi, who was running millions of copy ads in search worldwide in over 40 languages, sometimes the workload to do these ads correctly is quite let's say cumbersome, and sometimes you don't have the local insights, right? And by running experiments where we compare the ads that we were having but created by ourselves and the ones that are generated by AI, we see in many cases that the AI do a much better job. We have a better click-through rate, better conversion. So that's a clear domain. We have stuff obviously on the coding side. They call the engineers there have their Copilot now in GitHub. We're starting to use it more and more to automate part of the coding. Obviously, also on the display, everything that is creative and around banners, in remarketing, in Facebook, TikTok, and so on. We are starting to test different iterations by using AI. So all of this stuff is more around workflow optimization and savings and scaling faster. Now, the other big question on AI, that's the one we don't know at least, but we are obviously following very, very closely, and we are very curious to see what happens, is will it fundamentally change the user behavior? This is, will customers who today run a search by basically for a flight, typing in origin, destination, dates, and then looking at the result page, will they change their behavior and become a more conversational, let's say, dynamic where you ask a bot and he answers you, and these kind of conversational platforms will pop up in many different touch points, right? We are starting to see them in search, obviously in Bing, and also now in Google gradually, but we're also going to see them in all of basically the Office stack of Microsoft, so that you will have the capabilities to chat with a bot while you're writing your Word document or your Excel sheet, right? And then you potentially can ask him, hey, by the way, give me the cheapest flight to London for next week. All of this stuff, we don't know if it will happen. And this is something where it can be a major disruption. It can mean that now where we're investing massively in search engine marketing, we might need to reshuffle it, or perhaps not, because perhaps it will be the search engines who will own the chatbots, the key touch chatbots, and therefore we're gonna be able to keep using them. A lot of question marks. We don't have the answers, but what we are trying to do is basically testing or putting a little bit of a seed in all of these different plans to see what will basically fly. And again, we are obviously working closely with Microsoft on the Bing chatbot, and we are discussing with Google, with Bard, and some of the new type of search engine AI-driven results they're seeing. So we are trying to explore all of these different levels, and at least what we feel and keep is that thanks to our technical capabilities, since most of the stuff that is under the hood for these chatbots will be API driven, and we have a very strong API tech stack, we can be actually the front runners in whatever happens, whatever is the touch point, in whatever chatbot environment it happens, we will try to be the first ones who get integrated and see how it works, which is a little bit the similar thing we did back in a few years ago with Google Flights. When Google Flights started, they were only airline.coms, and we were the first one. We pioneered giving them the content, and that gave us an edge over some of our competitors.
For me, that's the big question. I mean, it's a really good point, is where am I going to go to book the flight in 3 years, right? Am I going to ChatGPT and asking what you said, no? Find the cheapest flight to London? And that's why companies like you, Expedia, they were also one of the first ones creating this plugin inside the platform. So at least you should be there, and then we'll see where am I booking the flight. But of course, you should be one of the contenders there in order to get this booking.
And I think that one thing is that generative AI is ruthless, right? It's ruthless in the sense that it doesn't care about what commercial relationships you have. It doesn't care what the human relationship you have, and then, okay, I'm going to work with that partner because that's, no. Here's going to be, I want this flight, and maybe the best virtual interliner will be, whatever, I don't know what the name will be, the ChatGPT flights, whatever it is. But in that scenario, like what will matter a lot is having unique inventory, right? Because somebody else is, we as consumer might not really care who's selling it. Where is the inventory coming from? Somebody else, an agent, a robot, is putting together the flight according to what we asked, and they're putting it together ruthlessly from different providers in a way that is optimal for what I asked. And in that sense, if you don't have, I think that the direct providers that's a plus for them, I think, because the flight will be flown by United, right? But that can change things around, right? In terms of, that has a lot of implications in terms of brand building, in terms of how important is it to build a brand, right? We were talking about the importance of brand building. Well, it's difficult, and I think that but it's, as Mario said, it's difficult to know now. I mean, all the direct applications are that you can put in place today is on customer service, on coding, on the engineering team, on marketing team, and I think that it is making professionals a lot more efficient and better professionals. It is augmenting the human productivity. Then on trying to guess, the business applications and where it's going, is like guessing what the killer applications of the iPhone was when it started, right? We were all talking, it's like reading the newspaper, because that's what we did with the computers, or it's like buying an Expedia flight. But we would have never thought that there was going to be you could ask a private car to pick you up here in 5 minutes. Right? That sort of, it's very difficult for any of us to imagine what can come. But I think that it is moving extremely fast. Just like everybody has been talking about AI and machine learning for a long time. Now things are moving faster, and there's real application. Well, there's very strong consumer applications that people can use for their advantages as students, as teachers, as entrepreneurs, as freelancers, as whatever they want. And but I do think that it will be at least interesting to see the impact it will have on loyalty, right? On brand loyalty. And it is also interesting to see how another thing that people talk about a lot is how the younger generations like to gravitate around brands that have some sense of community, right? So there's investment in community. Very few brands, I think, have really that sense of community where it is the fans of the brand building the community itself, instead of the company doing it on a very marketing oriented focus. But if you're able to build communities around brands, that could be a way to kind of bypass that commoditization of travel that could happen with the future iterations of AI.
Cool. Well, guys, I think this has been a really interesting and insightful conversation. So thank you very much, Mario. Thank you very much, Mauricio, for coming today. And I mean, you can come anyway whenever you come.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.